To start with, what do you want to
know? Who are you?
My name is Jim Carroll. I'm a lead architect with Microsoft Consulting Services in the East Region Center of Excellence.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, which is a fancy way of saying I get to do a lot of the complex database and BI projects.
Okay.
That's
and usually we have people who do things on Channel 9, right? And
yes.
I heard you guys do a lot. So tell me a little bit about some of the projects you worked on in the last couple months or 6 months.
In the last couple months, we've worked on a data warehouse and BI development process for a major retailer.
Are we allowed to say the major retailer?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can, but I don't really know if I should.
You told me earlier. It's a major retailer.
Yeah. It's a pretty big retailer.
It's one I shop at a lot. So.
And you usually do if you need to do home repair, and we'll let it go at that.
Yeah.
One of the things we're doing for this retailer is we are building a entire data BI platform. So we are actually, they get all brand new hardware, is almost 36 boxes, test, dev, and production all at once. So one of the things we're doing is setting and configuring all that hardware up for a platform BI. On top of that was SharePoint, and on top of that was Business Scorecard Manager 2005, SQL 2005 with clusters, Analysis Services 2005, Integration Services 2005. So we got
SharePoint 2003.
SharePoint 2003.
Now who are you?
My name is Dan Manrique. I'm a senior consultant with Microsoft Consulting Services. My focus is on app dev and SQL development.
Right. Now, what did all this technology do for this retailer? I mean, did it change their business radically?
Well, what it is a platform. What they've done is committed to the Microsoft Business Intelligence platform. Okay. So what we're essentially doing is setting up everything they're going to need going forward. Scorecards, data mining, data analysis, cubes, reporting, you name it. This is a wholesale commitment. Some of the other things that got interesting about this is one of the things that we're struggling with is the BI development process, not just product configuration. What does the development process look like for a BI effort? Yeah. In other words, what does the team process look like? What is your source control? What's your code promotion? How do you do that? And is it any different for a business intelligence environment than it is for your traditional OLTP web service WinForm development? The answer is yes, but in really unexpected, well, not even unexpected, surprising ways. Let's put it that way. So one of the challenges is, well, for example, even though you're doing check-in, check-out, and versioning, there's no real way, at least on the surface, for multiple developers to work on the same project at once. How do two different developers work on the same report? The answer is you don't. But you still have to have rollback and versioning. Inheritance with SSIS, so packages can inherit packages.
What's SSIS?
SQL Server Integration Services.
Okay.
It's the replacement.
Gotta learn all this Microsoft jingo.
It's the replacement. It's the replacement for DTS.
Which is desktop.
It's data transformation services, which is what it was in SQL 7 and SQL 2000. It's really cool technology, but there's some interesting questions about what does the development paradigm look like. So packages, which is a unit of execution, can actually inherit from other packages. So what do you do about data sources? What's the best practice for data sources in an enterprise environment? And can you inherit error trapping? So can you write one package that just does error trapping, everybody else inherit it? And can you inherit connections? There's all kinds of questions about it, and that's some of the stuff we're trying to nail out in conjunction with the dev teams.
And how do you deploy it?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have to deploy it with the source code? Can you serve it up as a binary?
Yeah.
You know, if it needs to go into a specific product release, how do you deploy that?
Yeah. How do you?
Well, that's what we're figuring out. We're not really sure yet. So those are some of the things that we get to do with Microsoft Consulting Services, and we're working very closely with the dev teams. All the guys, one of the things we're doing up here in Redmond this week is talking to them. And they're saying, can you try this? You know, we thought about this, but we haven't done it. What does it physically look like? Those kinds of things. That's some of the stuff we're getting to do right now.
Yeah. You guys do some other stuff too, right? You built an app for, the Katrina?
Well, actually, we did. I'm going to let Dan, because there's an interesting story in how it got started. And there's some interesting permutations.
Was that for the Red Cross, or was that for some?
It started out not, but then the Red Cross saw what we were doing, and we worked in it, and then adopted what we were doing. And the code base has subsequently been used in Rita. It was used in Hurricane Rita. It was used in Hurricane Wilma. It was used for the mudslides down in Guatemala, and it's being used by the Pakistani government now. So the work that we did for Katrina and other code elements, so we'll let Dan talk about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But we just actually got word that some of the federal government stuff we were doing, I'll talk more about this a little bit later, but some of the stuff that we did was in matching evacuees with names, matching searches and names. So some of the stuff that we did is actually being investigated by elements of the federal government to do lookups as people are coming across real time through the communication systems.
Wow.
So it's actually really cool. So why don't you talk about the story and talk about
And also, maybe remind me later on about how do people get in touch with MCS and you know, how did you just get a call from a retailer one day and, hey, we need a little system here?
We'll be
or is there a process that
No, I'm sure MCS Manager would be glad for me to talk about how people can contact us and how we'll work with them. But why don't we let Dan talk about exactly how the Katrina Safe project got started.
Okay.
And then he can talk about the various code elements, because there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And what's important to remember, and it'll come out in the story, is that everything that he talks about we delivered in 1 week, which talks about the power of exactly what the Microsoft.NET platform really does. So why don't we let him talk for a bit?
So what is Katrina Safe? What does it look like? You know.
That's a great question. So Katrina hits. I'm sitting in my home office, and Jim has no power.
Which is where
I live in the Orlando area.
Okay.
So I'm right outside of Orlando in a town called
Florida.
Sanford.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right
And
by
Jim's in Alabama.
Walt Disney World, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's, everybody comes down to see our house.
Yeah.
So Jim's in Alabama. So he's feeling the brunt of the storm. I mean, he didn't get major damage to his house or to his property, enough, lost power, etc. So, we just went through this storm. I see this email come through from a guy named John Morella. He's actually on the scene. He's actually at an evacuee center. He's helping people send notifications to their loved ones through Hotmail. Okay? So I look at that email and say, look, he's really trying to help, and I can see how that's a good thing. I said, that doesn't scale. It's a good spot solution, but how can we really make this?
Yeah, not when there's hundreds of thousands of people involved.
And there are evacuee centers all over the place.
Yeah.
The different the Astrodome. You're talking about people out in Provo, Utah. So they're scattered all over the place. So I said, well, I'd really like to get involved in this, and maybe I could help you out. This was about 6 o'clock at night. So it's important to watch the timeline because it's really amazing how fast this all progressed. So about 6 o'clock at night, I'm IMing him saying, hey, check your email. Take a look at this. Look what's going on. I've kicked off this process. So we start talking about it. That night we start, talking about flushing out those kind of ideas. Jim starts designing the database. I start building the web application.
Now, nobody from the Red Cross or any FEMA
This
or
was
anybody
just
called you. You just
This is Dan and Jim
just kicking off stuff back.
just doing it.
Right.
Yeah, and really it was on our own time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another guy that is involved. His name's Dave Gardner. He's with Microsoft out in Sacramento, California. So you got a guy in Birmingham, Alabama, a guy in Orlando, Florida, and a guy in Sacramento, California. So I sent out an email. It's like, hey, man, we need hardware. And one of the funniest things about this is Dave goes, well, I got a 6-way just sitting here in your house. You have a 6-way just sitting in your house. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, we can use it. So this is by 11 o'clock. We'd already registered the domain name, and we'd already started writing code. So this is a 5-hour process, and we work most of the night. Then the next day comes out, and I was talking to a friend of mine.
All right, you guys.
He goes, well, I'm getting ready to get on this conference call with a bunch of people who are public sector, because Dan and I at the time were both in Microsoft public sector. And so I'm listening to this call and listening to all these responses, and one of the things that comes up is the government of Louisiana has asked for us to help them with an evacuee tracking system. Okay, and this is how this is where things go from weird to nuts in about 20 minutes flat, because my buddy goes, well, Jim's already working on one. I think we can use his. So Dan and I have been just kind of kicking around, how can we help people? What can we do altruistically? The next thing I know, literally 20 minutes later, my phone's ringing off the hook. Now, this is about 3 o'clock on Thursday. So I'm in a frenzied call with Dan and Dave. I'm like, everything we did last night.
And when was the hurricane hitting? On Wednesday?
It hit parts of the country on Monday, and it hit parts of the country on Sunday and Tuesday, depending on where you were.
Yep.
So I basically call these guys and say, look, everything we did till 4 o'clock in the morning last night is gone. We're going to have to start all over again because we got a new set of requirements. So we worked again Thursday night, and then we woke up Friday, and we found out that we're in the midst of this thing, and all of a sudden we are the official Microsoft evacuee tracking system. This is the official response from Microsoft. So it started 48 hours earlier It's just something we were trying to do. And then by Friday, we started.
No good deed goes unpunished. You start out a little fun project on your own, and now you're in charge of a major.
Exactly. So what we did was our official response for the hurricane was in Austin, Texas, at our Microsoft Technology Center there, which is the MTC. So the MTC guys were gracious enough. I mean, world-class developers. And if you ever need to sit down and talk to a group of developers on how to use our stuff, Austin MTC is the way to go. I mean, they're just phenomenal. So a friend of mine called me. The guys, this is our official response center, and at 11 o'clock, the decision was made. Everybody needs to go from Orlando, Birmingham, Sacramento. We've cleared this calendar for MTC. We've cleared the MTC calendar the following week. They're yours. We want you here in Austin, Texas. So we push this thing out the door. And then at this time, it's where the architecture starts going nuts. So what happens is another guy I've never heard of calls me from Washington, D.C. He's named Phil McMillan. He's also Microsoft Consulting Services. And Phil is basically a speech server guy. That's what he does. He does speech server and he does development. And he goes, and I said, look, man, I'm not sure. He starts to introduce himself. He's a really nice guy. And I said, man, I'm trying to be rude, but I got a million things going on right now. Who are you and what can you do for me? And Phil literally goes, me, speech server guy, me help. And I said, when can you be on a plane? He said, there's a plane that leaves from Dulles in an hour. I'll be on that plane. So Phil's flying in. I mean, this guy's never met, and we all land in Austin, Texas, and we all start writing code at 9 o'clock at night. This is on a Friday night. And at that point, this is where the architecture and things just start just going nuts. So why don't you talk, through the timeline, what we decided and what we cranked out the door over the next 72 hours.
Yeah, so at this point, we're basically saying we need to do the website. The website's important. The website's the way to reach, okay? But there's a problem with the website. It's fundamental. How is a disconnected collection agency, a collection worker at these evacuee centers, how are they going to collect all this information? Because let's face it, it's not addresses anymore. It's rows, cots. So there's pictures of the Astrodome, and it's nothing but cot. So it's Joe Smith is row 3, cot 9. That's where he lives.
Yeah.
So how do you collect that information? You don't collect it on a website. And really, those locations are not really getting internet connectivity. So maybe they'll go outside to
Starbucks.
Exactly. There's some
The savior of all crisis.
There's a lot to that.
So literally, all the big vendors are really chipping in to help.
Yeah.
Dell's shipping hardware. I mean, all these different companies are just shipping hardware. But really, there's no application to use on them.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that scenario and saying, damn, we got to adjust that. And finally, there's a concept of not only the tracking the evacuee, but the reality is I don't know where my Uncle Joe is.
Yeah.
Where's Uncle Joe? So there's an inquiry system that needed to be built as well. So we had to start saying, okay, from an architecture perspective, we can't just track evacuees. Now we got to track the inquiries and try to do a matching algorithm. So, and let's face it, how many spellings of Boudreaux can you come up with, and Louisiana can you come up with, and so forth. So Miss Joe and Sally Smith. So you can't really require any bits of information that's key, like a social, because it's a public website.
Yeah.
So now you got Granny Smith, who wants to find out about her loved one who maybe lives in Louisiana, is not computer based. So how can we enable Granny to put an inquiry in and to be notified when her nephew gets found or her grandkid gets found?
Yeah.
So now we're starting to look at a speech server component. So we basically say, okay, look, we need to build a web application, we need to build a smart client application, we need to build a speech server application. So that's impetus.
So 3 apps.
3 apps. And of course another one came for reporting and a couple others.
Yeah, I mean, when all is said and done, let's run through the laundry list first, and then we'll talk about what each component does, so you might want to dive into it.
Okay.
So when we're writing code from Saturday, Sunday night we turn on the website. Monday afternoon we turn on outbound speech. So you actually, if you file an inquiry and 2 days later your person, Scoble, is found, the system automatically does a match, and it will send you either a phone call or an email to let you know that that person was found. So within 24 hours we turn on the website. Within 48 hours we turn on outbound speech. Within 72 hours we turn on a smart client that has offline capability.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a connection, you don't have to. You can enter it offline for the caseworkers to come back.
And the click once deployment, which is just balls cool.
Yeah. Click once deployment was there. Then we turned on 24 hours after that. We turned on map point web services so that somebody can be so you can actually see on a map where that individual is located.
Okay.
And in that entire process, we also turned on what Dan's talking about, intelligence algorithm, because we could not collect unique IDs, no social, no driver's license, no nothing. So the question is, when you have no required fields, because you're pulling data in from everybody, we're pulling in web services, we're pulling in XML files, we're getting data from everybody. Number one, there's a data duplication problem, because within 48 hours there was like 15 websites. Within 10 days there's 150 track and inquire. So you got duplication all over the place. The SQL Server team, the SQL Server integration services guys on the dev team took 2 days out with the Microsoft Research guys to deliver this code to us. And what it did was eliminate duplicates, and then it used data mining in SQL Server 2005 to actually tell you with a degree of probability whether or not this was a match. So Dan's last name is Manrique. How do you spell it? You just know your buddy Dan is somewhere down. You don't know his street address, you know his phone number. So we actually did cardinality matches to say with a degree of probability we know this person is who this person is, who it is. Whether the spelling was right, it cleaned up the data. There were 17 different ways to spell Louisiana. You know, how do you spell Texas? It does all these cleansing stuff and it does all these matchings.
Right.
So there were how many web services?
There was 3 main web services. There was a whole code library and a whole other functions.
By the way, we're in a public area, so should have found a conference room.
It's all right.
What the heck?
So, yeah, the web services basically when we made the decision to have multiple applications.
Yeah.
The decision was made to have one set of web services that would be leverageable through the Smart Client application, the Speech Server application, as well as the web application.
Right.
So you have the same helper functions that are available throughout the applications, but enabled through web services. So when the web services happen, you know, you can the speech server, the people who are working on the speech enablement can call that same web service. So it's so easy to deploy an application like that because now all you have is one common set of APIs.
Right. Wow.
So within a week, when all is said and done, within a week we delivered a smart client app, online, offline, 5 web services.
It's 3 to 5 web services.
5 web services, a web front end, an outbound speech server application, an inbound speech server application, a map location to do geospatial analysis, an intelligent algorithm to do matching, and oh, by the way, there was also a reporting application on top of that as well, and there was a skin service in case you want to do an RSS feed and everything else. We did all that in 7 days.
Wow.
So if that doesn't talk about the power of the Microsoft platform and what you can do with web services and .NET, I don't know of anything else that would.
All done in C#, or what kind of languages did you use?
We used. There's another great thing about our platform.
Yeah.
Some of the developers that were there were more prone for VB.NET.
Yeah.
Like Jim. And some of the other developers were more hardcore and they were C#. And that's the beauty. So a lot of the really smart guys, you know, they were right in the middle tier, they're right in the helper applications, we were all using C#. On some of the UI functionality, like the web application, we're using VB.NET with code in the code behind. So it really really allowed the flexibility of rapid development. I mean, you can't say any more rapid than that. Yeah. So,
what did you guys learn from this process? What would you do differently if another hurricane or earthquake hit here or something like that?
Run.
Yeah.
Run. Don't start answering email.
I'm busy.
Don't start answering email.
I think
say I'm on vacation. Put an out of office message.
I think before you answer that kind of question, you really have to we really have to say some of the reasons that kept driving us to having 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night. You know, can you briefly talk about some of the emails and some of the stuff that we were getting directly through the inbound email alias?
Yeah, there was it's all emotional tie-in, and there's you know, keep in mind that when we talk about 7 days, in reality, I don't know how many man hours went into this. Because there were partners that were helping us with the speech server stuff, did some great stuff. There were partners, you know, ISP who was hosting this stuff.
Can you name any of those?
I'm trying to remember. Well, it was out on the website. Actually, it's katrinasafe.org, katrinasafe.com. They both resolved.
Okay.
We also, you know, there were people who were working, you know, some of the guys and the partners were literally sleeping in the conference rooms. I mean, so you're working 22-hour days was for 10 days. It took me months to get my sleep cycles back to normal. Because they were just running on pure energy. I mean, it's pure adrenaline is all it is. The very first email that we got, which is when I said we got to get a handle on this. The sales teams were helping out. I mean, the guys in public sector were just phenomenal. Microsoft Public Sector account team for Texas and for Louisiana, they were just unreal. The very first email we got was from a woman, and you can't prove identity, so you're just having to go on face value. Was from a woman who said that she hadn't seen her son or her husband in like 2 days and didn't know where they were, and could we help her, please help her find them. That was the very first thing. Well, I mean, that was at 2 o'clock in the morning off no sleep already, so people were falling out in the middle of the desk because of the emotional strain. Some of the other emails we got was similar to that, but then there was the kind emails that said, look, I used your site, it helped me find somebody who I'd not been able to find anywhere else. So there was, it was just pure adrenaline, pure emotion. Never mind from the technology push. I do think that there's a programmatic, prescriptive way that not just the private sector, but a partnership of the private sector and public sector can and should be doing things to prevent that to ensure that we don't have to go through this Herculean effort in the future. Because it shouldn't happen. I mean, it's predictable. Whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a tornado, whether it's 911, it doesn't matter. The systems and the way you can put the systems together, if you're smart with the way you use XML, if you're smart, they're knowable. What the response can be from a technology perspective is knowable. So if there was anything that I've learned, other than the fact that we really do have the coolest frickin' software on the planet, and because I can't think of anybody else pulling this together in this way. If there's any lesson to be learned, is that we should, and matter of fact, Microsoft IT, Ron Markowitz's organization, has taken that code base and is now working on it, cleaning it up, shoring it up, so that the next time something like this happens, we're ready to go. Working in conjunction with MSNBC and some others to start skinning the web services, so the next time we don't have 150 different repositories all over the web. We've got
because everybody and their brother was starting one of these.
And that's exactly what was happening.
Because you're emotionally, when you see something like this, you want to get involved, and you can't go there, right? So you can't. A lot of people couldn't go there, and they could just. But there's geeks out there. Oh, I can write a little web service or something like that.
Of course, and then one thing that's really disappointing is that there's so many people who just want to take a shot at Microsoft. And that, being someone who really cares about the company, really cares about what we do, to have someone take a shot and say, look, these Microsoft people, they're being paid to do this, and this was a paid thing and so forth. No, this was starting out of, my office in my home. And, we were getting shots for not using this particular format, this PFIF format, which we never even heard about before we started the project. So, you start seeing the reviews. I mean, we had this crazy interview with eWeek, and all of a sudden it was, our names, and, if you do a search for either one of our last names, it's all over the web. You see people start taking shots at that. That's a really disappointing thing, and we really got to get the mind share to understand, look, we are people working at Microsoft. We are people who respond to these things, and it's not just some big, ugly monkey. That's one thing I would really try to get across, when I was talking to people about this particular project. These are people who, I have a wife and 2 kids. Jim has a wife and 2 kids. Most of the people we work with have wife and kids. We took 7 days and just completely disappeared. Literally, my wife went out to lunch on that Friday to get us some lunch. I was in my office. I was, clothes were around the house. By the time she went to the fast food place and came back, I had my bag packed and I was heading to the airport. That's really where people at Microsoft, try to make a difference.
Is there a process now of hooking up with people who care about emergency situations to sort of get something else going out of this? In other words, to transfer your learning to the world at large, hey, when there's an earthquake, here's the 15 things you need to do, like right from the gate, instead of trying to wait for 2 guys to, take on the initiative.
There appears to be some effort along that line. Microsoft Public Sector is the group within Microsoft that calls on public sector accounts, obviously, and they're working now with some of the state and local agencies and with FEMA and with some others to ensure that there's something in place.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's Microsoft technology or somebody else's technology, they're working on that framework, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, it was obvious. It was just that I don't know if you remember, because everybody was kind of wrapped up at Katrina, but there was like 45 days that were just crazy. Every week there was another bloody hurricane. You know, like I said, Rita saying, and this code base has been duplicated in all of those emergencies. I mean, at this point, it's public domain. If you want it, you can have it. I don't think it's secured, but I know that the algorithms are being documented. So there's problems that we found with data quality. There's problems that we found with scalability. There's problems that show that the web service model really does work, not just in the Microsoft vacuum, because we were getting data feeds from other operating systems, you know, via XML and some other things. So there is an effort to do it, to create a broader framework effort. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with it now because I've gone on to a different role, but I know that there are efforts in the public sector groups working on it.
Yeah. Any other things that you guys can think of that you learned from this process that you would have done differently, or
well, there's not really a process.
No.
What there was a bunch of guys who were emotionally strained, who were smart and knew their job, and who we just fell in. Right? Did we do the normal? Here's the spec. No, we got to have this. I mean, it was literally, you know, a build a day, a build every 4 hours to get it out the door. And so guys were just, I mean, phenomenal.
Well, did you
guys.
learn something from this that might transfer to another context, a more normal business context?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there a new development methodology that you guys discovered? The 22-hour no spec and get it out the door.
I'm gonna have to admit that we're a big fan of the Tiger Team methodology now.
Okay.
You know, 10 people can change the world if you're just dedicated enough and you're smart enough about how you're doing it. A couple of things from a technology perspective. You know, I would tell the developers out there, take a long, hard look at speed server and take a long, hard look at smart client technology and what it really means and what you can really do with it. Because it was just freaking awesome to get that phone call. I still have it recorded on my phone, the very first test phone call that went out of that system. It said, "This is a message. You know, here you go. We found your person, and here they are." But there were some. I mean, I think some really good lessons learned. I mean, process was it. One of the things we had a problem with, honestly, that's what worked really well in Motive. Some of the problems is what you're asking. The build process, you get it done right, and you get it done right the first time, or you're going to pay. Okay. Because we lost a lot of time over integration of builds, just the normal day-to-day things you think about. And yeah, we know it's a pain in the ass. You're going to have to do it anyway. Check in, check out of your code, proper versioning, you know, making sure the interfaces are working right. We lost, I don't know how much time because of the freaking build process kept busting.
So you'd say that's the first thing. Build server should be number one.
Get your build server done and get it done right first, because you will suffer down the road. I mean, and we knitted together a lot of cool stuff, but we could have done better if we'd spent even an hour, 2 hours up front, even in this accelerated environment, to do the versioning process and do the source control process right, because we suffered big time. I mean, we were constantly, things were breaking. I mean, because here's the thing, right? You go from nothing to a speech component, a SQL component, a smart client component, a web service component, a UI component, language resource files because it works in both Spanish and English. So all this stuff starts piling up. And if you don't do the versioning right, it started sagging. So we lost.
Yeah, it's all got to build at the same time.
Yeah. We lost, what, a day?
Yeah.
I mean, we lost just about a day out of 7 because we didn't do the build process right. So think of what we could have done with that extra day. If we'd nailed that right. What else? What were some of the other gotchas in that environment?
Make sure you have lots of good food.
Make sure you got lots of fast food.
Lots of good food.
Probably better food, because that will keep you energetic. You know, the crappier the food is, the worse the sleep deprivation hits you.
I think it's important to isolate your teams, making sure that your teams are working. Your SQL guys are working together, making sure your dev guys are working together, make sure, because what happens is they're in a long, protracted development cycle, which is how a lot of development processes go these days. Your teams are not really communicating as well as they should. Yeah. When you're trying to work with a little Tiger team, you got to make sure that they're together. There's clean handoff, there's clean pass off, or else the build process is even worse than it already is. So I think that's a lesson learned. I think that working with, making sure you bring IT into the mix early.
Yeah,
That's another one that,
absolutely.
The guys that really, stayed as long as we did from the IT side. Generally, you see the IT guys kind of doing their own thing. They stayed with the project, and that's a really best practice when you're doing an accelerated development process.
Because once you get done, you still got to put it out the door, and you still got to maintain it.
Yeah.
Right. So even after the build's done, what is it going to take to deploy this thing? What's your dependency trees? The IT guys worked with us from the start, and they were just, you need another box, here you go. You need new, they were phenomenal. So I get IT in early. I mean, it's the basic MSF 101, but you want to prove that it works, then here's your crucible, and then that's exactly what it was.
Right.
So we talk about all these things at MSF, but how many people really pay attention to them?
Yeah.
But for our customers, I think it was key differentiation. So
Do you have any sense of the traffic levels that you guys were seeing on these servers?
we shut down what was it? The NS lookup traffic shut down D3. Was that what it was? I can't remember. We actually T3. We actually shut down the ISP that was hosting it for a while. And to their credit, they just sent out an email to. This is another one of the things where people really stepped up to the plate. And again, I'd encourage you to go out and take a look at who was helping us. But the original hoster, we were getting so much traffic that they actually sent out an email to the other customers and said, "This is what's going on. We're going to keep it up. We know your website's slow, and we're backing off and solving the problem another way." They refused to shut it down, even though it negatively impacted their other paying customers. So to their credit, it was phenomenal. So I'd encourage everybody to go out to the site. I think it's still up. I can't remember. And there's a list of partners, and those people should be thanked. The Austin MTC guys, Jay Sawyer, who's one of the developer evangelists in Texas, did a phenomenal job. Larry Clark, who's a TS that was doing reporting services. Jim Keene,
He's the man.
his little propeller was just spinning at a rate I don't understand. He's one of the finest developers I've ever worked with. Michael, Scott, Amy, who's the MTC director, Bart Robertson. I mean, all those guys just really stepped up to the plate. So it was something to see.
Interesting.
So anything? What would you like to know?
I don't know.
What do you think the developers?
So how many boxes at the end of this thing? How much lines of code? How many boxes?
That's actually a damn good question. How many lines of code was it?
I have no
I
idea.
have no earthly. How many lines of code that was?
We've got multiple code libraries. We've got multiple helper functions. We've got multiple business objects. We've got multiple. I mean, we're using the enterprise library. That's a big thing. Best practice. If you're not using enterprise library, you're insane. The logging functions, the exception functions, the database calls,
The offline,
the
smart
offline,
client.
smart client, all that stuff's just built in. So if someone's not using the enterprise library, that's leverage the enterprise library.
Right.
That's true. Yeah, Densmore and guys over at PAG do a great job. That was true. We could not have done this without the helper files, and they were without the intlib. What else was there?
Yeah. So
Well, there's got to be 10, 15,000 lines of code in there. I mean, it's just unreal. And that doesn't include stored procedures and table structures. Jim Dugan out of the Dugan is another one. I don't know if you know Dugan, but Dugan's with the MTC in Washington D.C. Yeah. So Dugan was with the MTC in Washington D.C. And one of the really cool things is Jim left his house on Labor Day at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
With nothing but the clothes on his back, and flew all the way to Austin, Texas. And he literally had to go to the store to buy underwear because he had nothing. He had no toothbrush, no nothing. And so if there's another best practice, don't buy underwear at the hotel gift shop because apparently it's outrageously expensive relative to what you'd pay at another store. So, so he literally, and he left the house at 3:00 in the morning on Labor Day with his wife 8 months pregnant. And worked with us for 7
probably paying for that stuff.
Yeah. she may have said something. Tell him I don't know. What else? What do you want to know?
I don't know.
There's all kind of funny stories. I mean,
Some of those stories we can't repeat. We cannot repeat some of those stories. But there were some good ones. What else? How else can we?
I don't know. I remember seeing a little bit of the email going back and forth, just talking about some of the efforts. You weren't the only Microsoft team working down there, right? There was a separate team working at the Red Cross.
There were, yes, it's important to keep in mind that we were just one portion of the total Microsoft response.
Yeah.
All right, so we did this application, which is really, really cool from a technology perspective, which the developers care about. But there were people who were down at Austin, who are at San Antonio, who are at Houston, who were working there, processing, evacuees and helping them find things. Guys were working with the Red Cross to see what could we do to help Red Cross. Hotmail team was doing some stuff. MSN team was doing some stuff.
They drove the trucks.
The trucks, small business guys. They were delivering
yeah.
hardware. This was just one small component of the total effort.
Yeah. It seems like disasters are getting different every time they happen, right? I was in the '89 earthquake, and it took me, 5 hours to get a photo out of the San Jose area and to a newspaper on the West Coast. And today, even in a big disaster, I was getting SMSs from a guy who lives in New Orleans, on the ground, who was explaining. And so the information sharing is speeding up. The word of mouth network is speeding up. The kinds of data that you guys are going to collect probably next time around are going to be different, wouldn't you think? Or
not really. When you really stop and think about it, regardless of the origin, in other words, regardless of the impetus of the particular event, the things that technology can do is relatively predictable. The question that made New Orleans interesting was, what do you do when you have no connectivity, and what do you do when you have no power? Because the one thing a computer has to have is power.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it doesn't work. And the other thing you have to have in the internet is communications infrastructure. So the question that has to be asked, and it's a very good question, Pakistan was another good example, and yes, they enhanced it for other things, such as cultural issues and cultural considerations, and then things like photo integration and these type things. So it's grown since. But I think that the biggest question that you have to ask is, what happens when nothing that you expect to work works? So yes, you got an SMS message, but how long did it take that SMS message to get out the door? When you're in the theater of operations, what exactly can technology do?
Well, those were immediate. What was funny was he wasn't able to call, and he wasn't able to get on the web. He wasn't able to blog the way he was usually used to.
Sure.
But he was able to SMS us. So we were getting information through SMS and posting it on our blogs and trying to share it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I think there are predictable ways that technology can be used, and there has to be a better way of communicating, collating, and disseminating this information. Because SMS message, because here's the perspective you have to take into consideration. This is the one that motivated us the most. What about those poor people who are looking for loved ones who are in New Orleans? Who don't have a phone, who don't have this. So when you get a disparity of systems and you get a disparity of data formats, I don't care if it's Linux, I don't care if it's WebSphere, I don't care if it's Oracle, I don't care if it's SQL. There has to be a better way to collate and distribute this information out the door. And I think if there was one thing, but the problem is the same, whether it's the '89 earthquake, whether it's 9/11, whether it's hurricanes, whether it's mudslides, God forbid whether it's another man-made incident. The technology response can be and should be predictable. And I think it has to be a mixture of public sector and private sector effort. It has to be.
So you're talking to the world. What do you want the world to do next time around? What is
I'm having a hard time just cracking my own nut. That's a little big for me to take on.
Yeah.
But what I would argue, and we started seeing some effort from this out of the private sector, what I would advocate is a private sector, public sector partnership that sits down and asks these questions. It's a think tank question. Okay, what happens if you have no power? What can we do? What's the minimum we have to have? And the technology exists right now to solve this problem. It exists in a platform, language, independent manner. You can solve this problem with today's technology. If you're willing to put the effort into it, do it up front.
Right.
And I would argue that we can, and I would argue that we have responsibilities to the remainder of our world citizens to do precisely that, regardless of who cuts your paycheck.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with that. Think tanks are fun, but they're not two guys at 4 in the afternoon who see a need and get. Because even if there was a think tank that had thought about this stuff, you guys didn't know about it.
No,
I don't know about it, and I'm pretty well read. So, how does it combine at that moment when something nasty happens in the world, and
Well.
guys like you see a need and start building systems? How do you know what system to build, and also how to build it so that it'll hook up to everybody else's system?
Well, there are two questions.
Yeah.
Right. Those are two separate issues. The communication efforts, web services technology allow us to do that, regardless of who you write them for or how you write them with. There are well-known interfaces, and the PIF? PFIF, which is, if we can figure out a bloody schema for doing financial transactions, we can figure out and agree to a baseline schema for tracking evacuees in case of emergencies.
Yeah.
So the question is, do you have the political will to get it done?
Yeah.
And then the question becomes fiat by community. Sun Tzu once said, you can't lead an army with a community, with a committee, sorry. This is the same type thing. So the question is, put aside who cuts your paycheck and realize that there is something more important here and figure this out. Well, that's the loudest cell phone ring I've ever heard.
Yeah, it is.
That's impressive. For those of you that don't know, this guy was like 30 feet away, so that was an incredibly loud ring. I think we could do it. I mean, I think we should do it, and I think Microsoft should get together, and I think we should get together with our public sector friends and partners, and we should figure this out, and I think we should do so with other technology companies who want to participate.
Yeah.
Because it's in this case, the challenge is not the data layer, which I love it to be that. It's transition of information across. And if we can do this with Wiki, you can do this with RSS feeds, you can do this with just standard XML files, you can do this, heck, you could do it with EDI transactions if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Here's the base set of data. What you do with it beyond that is your business. How you collate that and manage that within your own organization is up to you. And I think there are efforts. It's just the question is now we're Katrina's plus 6 months later.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, do we still have the political will to do it? Because now there's not a rush emergency.
Yeah. There'll be another one.
Yeah, and there will be another one.
Yeah.
You can take that to the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The views and opinions that we suggest are only our own and not the opinions of Microsoft or any of our independent partners. And just want to clarify.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Let him talk.
Do you think you could do it in 2 days next time around?
Oh, hell no.
To implement the existing code base, absolutely. Yeah, it's all in the source. It's all in source control, so we can absolutely get it out there in no time. Could we develop the whole 4-piece application? No, I mean, not in 2 days. I mean, we were really pushing it to get it done the way we did it in the first place, but I think it could be a lot faster the next time because we would know already what we're trying to accomplish. That's the whole mind share that you already acquired that we didn't have going in. I mean, we basically use good architecture principles, web services, code libraries, web application, smart client application, speech application. Yeah. As long as you stay with principles. Okay, now what's the schema? What's it look like? What is it? And what is done? So.
Yeah. Was there anything you would have done differently at the end? Or done differently, having the Monday morning quarterbacking syndrome.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. I mean, the question.
Less Diet Coke or something.
We're just mainly.
Maybe less tequila.
Set up next to a Starbucks, right? Is that what you should do? Is look for the Starbucks and then look for the ISP nearest to Starbucks, right?
I think we'll shift to Herradura instead of Patron tequila next time.
Yeah, perhaps. but I mean, the bottom line is this is technology and a human interest story as well. I mean, the people who tested was the wife and son of a public sector rep.
Yeah, a housewife and a kid in the military were our testers.
Really?
No technology experience at all. Our two primary testers was a housewife and a kid who was on military furlough. 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid on military furlough. So, I mean, everybody was thrown in. I mean, everybody. Yeah. So, it's... do we need to do our MCS spiel now? Because that was one of the things we need to come back to.
Sure.
Why don't you tell the people who MCS is?
Well, for more information on the Katrina Safe stuff, there's the Jim and Dan Show blog, which you could point them to. That blog has a couple entries on how this all started.
Jay Sawyer's blog.
There's Jay Sawyer's blog, which he did a great job. I mean, I was reading his blog and saying, "Oh yeah, that happened." You know, because after a couple of days of really getting 3 hours of sleep to 4 hours of sleep a night,
Your awareness goes down.
yeah, you get a little, you get a little code focused, you know. So there's a couple blogs. There's the eWeek article. You can still find that out there. So, so those are interesting bits of information if you want to find this. So, all right. So MCS. MCS is Microsoft Services. MCS is engaged through the product teams. Not the product teams. The account teams.
Yeah.
So the account teams are out in the field. They've got a set of customers that they interface with. So let's just say, for instance, I'm in the Greater Southeast District.
Yeah.
The Greater Southeast District includes North Carolina down, and as an MCS representative, we're asked to come in, do a scope of work, do the documentation, and go into a customer site and solve a particular business problem. Now, that may be completely our technology, or maybe not. You know, we understand that most customers are a heterogeneous environment.
Yeah.
They got some DB2, they got some Oracle, they got some of this, they got some of that, they got some Java, they got little fiefdoms, and they got little silos. So the MCS resources have the breadth and depth of experience to be able to cut across those different areas. We're not cheap compared to other consulting services and consulting available. So, you know, this is not where a profit center of Microsoft comes from. But when a customer says, look, we have this type of environment.
Yeah.
You go up the whiteboard, there's 20 different things going up on the whiteboard. Now, how do we integrate these things? Oh, by the way, yeah, we have Office. How do we integrate that together? What's the integration story?
Yeah.
That's where MCS can really bring something to the table.
Right.
You want to do this, that, no problem. If we don't, if you know, we bring the right resource to the table. So,
Yeah.
for instance, Jim is a master in BI. I've got extensive experience in application development. So you start matching the right resources to the right engagement,
Yeah.
you've got really positive results. So as opposed to an IBM Global Services or something like that, they just fill up an airplane when there's an engagement. Some people think that's a good idea. I'd rather have one or two specialists that understand the technology super deep, that have the touch points with the dev teams.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the reasons why Jim and I are here this week. We're meeting with the dev teams. We're meeting with the product teams and telling them, where's the gaps? The product team builds it based on a set of requirements.
Yeah.
How it really works in the field is what MCS knows.
Ah.
So when you implement Speech Server, or you're implementing SQL Server 2005 and Business Scorecard Manager, for instance, that's one of the engagements they're working on right now.
Yeah.
When you're working on those things, we find that, wow, it's not really documented that you can't put notification services on a 64-bit box.
Yeah.
You come to the product teams and you start talking to the product manager and say, look, this needs to change. How can we get around this? How can we build something around this to satisfy this customer requirement or that customer requirement? So MCS is about making sure that we can show the value of the technology that they already own,
Yep.
integrating into their particular environments.
So you do a lot of trial testing of when new, for instance, when Windows Vista is coming along now, you're probably playing with all the builds and getting up to speed and knowing what
Yeah.
it does and what it doesn't do.
Yeah, we eat our own dog food at Microsoft. It's a common term. There's a whole lot of joking around that. You see product managers actually chewing up the dog food bowl. We have to live the technology. We have to be somewhat the guinea pigs. You know, I've got multiple hard drives on my laptop, and on my laptop, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
I've got, XP running on one partition. I got Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition running another partition, and I got Vista on another partition. And basically every day, I get the new build onto my Vista partition.
Yeah.
So that way, I know exactly what's coming, and we're starting the process of building a BI gadget. So
Yeah, that's actually one of the cool things MCS gets to do. I mean, the way I break it down is there's a whole infrastructure within Microsoft that tells customers what can be done with the products. MCS are the guys that tell you when, how, where. This is when you do it, this is how you do it, this is why you do it, this is where you do it.
Yeah.
So we're the physical implementation engine. That's what we do. One of the other things we get to do, though, is we get direct feedback to the development teams.
Yeah.
So, like, Dan and I are working for several different development teams on several different things. How does this physically work? One of them is a gadget in Vista that's based on business intelligence. Combination. Here's Vista, here's BI. We get a chance to actually do some things where we put together something in time for the launch that focuses on BI. SQL Server team's really stoked. Vista team's kind of stoked. So that's one of the really.
So you guys know what doesn't work and what does work.
Absolutely.
You really know.
Well, it's one of those things. Yeah, that's a good idea, but you don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And here's why. So that's one of the things that MCS gets to do, both interaction with Redmond and for customers too.
Yeah. How did
Or
customers?
what was designed for usability versus?
Yeah.
We didn't design that to be usable. We designed it to be functional.
Yeah.
That was my first. That was great.
How do customers know that you're not misleading them? I mean, where does your credibility come online then?
That's actually a very good question.
Yeah, it really is.
In all reality, your credibility is by looking at the customer straight in the face and saying, I've done this, here's where I've done this, here's the evidence that proves that it works, and that we will be held accountable if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. In my opinion, credibility is the single greatest attribute or the single greatest risk for any individual MCS consultant, because you are only as good to your customers as credible as you are.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, and the satisfaction, well, let me rephrase this. MCS's primary success criteria is customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
Because we either do it or we don't. The
Yeah.
project either works or it doesn't. There is no other success metrics.
Yeah.
There's no unit sales, there's no cost of unit, there's no cost of sales, there's no revenue, there's no nothing. It either works or it doesn't. That's both the credibility and it's your success factors. It's your success criteria. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't do any other job. It's a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like you really make an impact on the world, which is.
Well, customers, it's not every day you get a chance to build a 20 terabyte data warehouse. Let's just put it that way.
And tell me about that one.
Well,
that's not Katrina Save.
No, that's not Katrina Save. No. That's working with various customers. Like one of the guys in the region, East Region United States, who's our focus, is New York. We've got Atlanta, Miami, D.C. So some of the stuff we get to play with is there's a certain financial customer that they have to have 24,000 transactions a second, sustainable over a 90-minute period. So we get to work with the dev team, and we get to work with the customer. We get x64 hardware, we get IA64 hardware, and we push the limits. This is where it's going to break down. These are the lessons learned, guys. So that feedback goes back in. 20 terabyte data warehouse.
Yeah.
Data warehouses to support, or OLTP applications that support thousands of concurrent users and insane exchange four-way clusters, and that's what MCS does. That's what if you ask MCS people what they really love about their job, it's the fact that they get to see the customer's face when it works and they get to play with the technology.
Yeah.
That's what we love about our job.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
Due to our model, due to the model,
Tell me about it.
the model is not many smaller customers really want to engage in very expensive Microsoft consulting services.
Yeah.
So we're lucky enough. I mean, this is where a lot of the job satisfaction comes in. We go into the very largest accounts.
Yeah.
We solve the hairiest problems, that, whether or not it's our software or not.
Yeah.
Whether it's not integrating some other third-party application or third-party integration tool, or trying to bring it into this environment, trying to say, okay, you got all these pieces now. If we can scale this out, here's how you're going to get your performance to serve your worldwide customer base.
Yeah.
The two customers that we're dealing with right now are worldwide. Very, very well-known customers.
Yeah.
So Yeah, you definitely want to look at my can of soda. But
one of them's a soda. The soda
One of them is a soda company that's based in the Southeast.
All right. a little soda company. Right?
just a little.
Just a little.
So, I mean, that's where a lot of the model comes into play. So since we don't have thousands of consultants for X amount of per hour, we're specialized, we're technical, we touch with the product teams, and we deliver on the very biggest accounts. So.
Well, thanks for. Is there anything else? We've covered a lot.
Rock on, man. Obviously, you got a lot of editing to do.
No editing. We don't edit this. You assume I actually do work around here.
Everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, that's how it.
Well, it was actually kind of funny when it ended up. Somebody said, "Well, can you go talk to the scobleizer?" Oh, hell yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because we watch Channel 9 all the time. I'm all over it. Yeah. So it's thanks for having us. But yeah, I mean it's. Engage with your MCS rep. Is that the right pitch?
Yeah, engage with your account team.
Engage
with your account team. Your
That's
account
right.
team has a virtual team that includes an engagement manager. Yeah. Engagement manager implements resources like us. So that's the really cool thing about Microsoft. It really is virtual. We do live what we talk about in many cases, in most cases. We talk about a distributed environment. We talk about distributed teams. So you got this account rep that happens to be in, let's just say, Atlanta. His account TS may live in Atlanta and focus on the same accounts that he's focused on. Then there's other product groupings, like information worker groupings, Office, SharePoint, all those type of technologies. So there's specialists around those technologies. Then there's a specialist in BizTalk and SQL Server and so forth.
Right.
So you got these TSs, and the TSs have the ability to talk intelligently about these technologies.
Yep.
How technical is still a question, but nonetheless, we've got some great TSs because a lot of times MCS resources go into TS roles and TS roles go into MCS roles, like myself. So now you've got these engagement managers. The engagement manager may be in Tampa, or maybe at Atlanta office, or maybe within the region. So they're focusing services on that account. So we really do work as a team, even though I work out of my home. I mean, I'm technically based out of the Tampa office, but I've seen the Tampa office twice. That's just the way we work.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I really didn't realize all the moving parts that go into.
Like I said,
there's a lot more than that.
I guess it boils down to this. I've said it before, so I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Microsoft MCS and services, right? No, not just MCS, but PSS. We're the other part of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So product teams, product marketing, technical specialists to a certain degree tell you what's possible. Mm-hmm. We tell you how to do it, when to do it, why to do it, where to do it. Premier certainly adds to that. It's not just MCS, it's very much Premier Services. If I got a closing point to make, I have the greatest job in the greatest company on the planet. And nobody can tell me they got a better job.
I do.
Yeah. except for the scobleizer.
Bill has a better job.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this for anybody else anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, period. Any conversation.
Yeah.
It's just there's nothing like it.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for spending some time, and thanks for helping out down in Katrina.
Glad to do it.
Glad to do it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.